Well, good day, my friends. Your old pal Jordan the Lion coming to you from Madison, Wisconsin. How y'all doing today? Hope you said great. We are going to see some music history today. Daze with Jordan the Lion, it begins right now. We hit a little bit of a detour on our way to Madison. It was this big, giant freaking cow. We had to stop and check out what this was all about. But even the cow isn't the most interesting thing here. This place is world famous. Ellenbach's Cheese Chalet. We gotta check this out. Plus, look at that. Look at that little mouse climbing the sign. How great is that? On the outside of the chalet, you can actually see depictions of people making the cheese. Then a giant state of Wisconsin over here. See what all the popularity is all about. Cool. Wow. Looks like a chalet. Strawberry cheddar. I haven't seen Lacy Swiss since I was a kid. I'm gonna have to get some of that. Cheese. I love fresh American too. I know most people don't like American, or most real cheese aficionados don't, but I do. The whole place literally looks like a chalet, as you would expect. That is more options than I know what to do with. Summer sausage. Salon. Oh, this stuff's great. I think we'll save one of those cheese heads for another time. One more cheesy detour before we get to Madison. We're not going to go in because we've already bought a bunch of cheese at the last place, but I thought anyone that cares enough to theme a place like this, the Mouse House, they deserve to be shown on a video. There, Hot Rod, you know how much your dad loves Elvis, so anytime we can do anything Elvis, we do it. And we're doing an Elvis one as part of our vlog today. We're going to go there first. So the intersection we're looking for actually is right up here. This actually took place in the town of Hawthorne, right here on this intersection. And they have, or had, we'll have to see if we can find it, a plaque for what happened right over here in front of this building. Crazy as this story is, I completely believe it because Ginger told the story in her book, and then they ended up doing a plaque on it here. Pretty funny story. They call it the Elvis Presley fight scene. So, I'll read to you what it says. It says, on this site, the corner of Highway 51 and East Washington Avenue, around 1 a.m. on June 24th, 1977, Elvis Presley was riding in the second of two limos, which had stopped for a red light. He was coming for a concert in Des Moines and had just arrived in Madison. Elvis noticed a young teen on the ground being beaten by two other youths here at the former Skyland service station. Elvis jumped out, moved quickly to the fight scene. They admitted later that they knew it was the legendary Elvis Presley who was standing in front of them in his classic karate stance. I'll take you on, he said. After a few classic karate moves by Elvis, the youths recognized him, stood, shook hands, and promised to stop fighting. Elvis asked, is everyone settled now? Elvis was on his way to the Sheridan and his last Madison appearance. He died 52 days later on August 16th, 1977. So yeah, it would have been right here on this corner. Ginger told the same story in her book. She talks about how they were doing that, and she said she couldn't believe when he opened the door, but that was Elvis. You know, like if he saw someone in need, he jumped in. And yeah, of course, when you see Elvis Presley in front of you, what are you gonna do, fight Elvis? I think things like this are why that Elvis movie that Baz Luhrmann did bother me so much, because when you have true crazy stories that people can verify, why do you need to take bits and pieces from real stories and make whole different stories, or change the truth, change the people involved? I cannot understand why so many artistic liberties, especially for someone who is considered to be one of the most interesting and fascinating people of our century. So I don't know, go figure. Great story though. And you know, in my opinion, Ginger is one of the few people that has not been caught in any lies. Her stories actually make sense. There's truth to them, so I believe this happened. Now we're gonna go meet up with a friend of mine, Jim, and we're gonna talk about the passing of Otis Redding. That happened here in Madison. John, can you imagine Elvis hopping out of his limo and getting into a fight stance to break up a fight? I can. Last time I was in Madison, we went to Chris Farley's grave in his childhood home. Now we're out here on the water. John and I are gonna walk over. They have an official plaque for Otis Redding and his band members and the pilot. Many people call Otis Redding the King of Soul, and it's kind of surprising to think that he passed away when he was only 26 years old. Now, this is interesting to have a sign right here that says, home of the national champion Mad City ski team. Free shows on Sunday at 6. And then they have a ramp over there. So it's actually, you have to take a stairs or elevator up to where the memorial is. So right over here is the beautiful memorial for Otis. Only 26 years old. I know he had a rough life growing up, kinda. His father had tuberculosis, so he had to drop out of high school when he was 15 to get a real job, but he was a good piano player, good singer, and he actually would enter every week a talent contest, and he would win $5 and won it like 15 weeks in a row. So he started performing and joining bands, but the real highlight for him as a young man was he loved Little Richard. He was so inspired by Little Richard, he idolized him. He got to be one of Little Richard's backup singers for a while. But one of the crazy stories that I had heard was that when Otis really kind of got discovered, he went out to LA and recorded some music. It didn't go very far, but where he broke out was that the Booker T and the MGs were going to help out with a session at Stax, and Otis was their driver. He drove him there, and he didn't even have a license, I don't think, at the time. But during one of the breaks, he asked if he could play the piano, and he did 2 songs, and one of the songs, the producer was like, kind of sounds like Little Richard. But then he heard him doing a ballad, doing a song that Otis was known for, I've Been Loving You. He signed him. And the rest was history. Of course, we know him for Respect and Sitting on the Dock of the Bay and Try a Little Tenderness and all those, but he's the king of the soul singers, as it says right here. Passing away in these waters at the age of 26. Apparently everyone warned them before they flew. Everyone at the airport told them not to fly. That it was icy and that it was rainy and foggy and everything that you don't want to encounter, and they decided to go anyway. Leaving from Cleveland, sadly. Otis was really at the height of his career at that time too. He was earning $35,000 a week as a performer, married his sweetheart, had 4 kids, had just bought a ranch, the Big O Ranch, which is actually where he's buried. So this tells the story of the end. It says, this seating area is dedicated to honor the memory of Otis Redding Jr., who lost his life in a plane crash in Lake Monona on December 10th, 1967, while en route to Madison engagement. Known as the King of the Soul Singers, Redding was acclaimed during his life in France and England as the world's top popular male singer. 4 months after his death, he achieved his first American #1 record with Dock of the Bay. I actually heard there was a story where they said there was one year where his records outsold Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra combined. It says on the morning of the flight to Madison, Redding had been warned of bad weather and was advised to postpone his trip. His loyalty to his Madison fans forced him to proceed. It was the only engagement of his career that he ever missed. Otis Redding stands with Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke in the first rank of American rhythm and blues singers. Sad. Now his grave is not open to the public, but I've seen online that his wife occasionally we'll invite like 10 fans to come out and spend the day at the ranch and visit Otis and keep his memory alive. Man, what a sad way to go. 26 years old with those pipes, and it was on his plane, his own plane. If you see photos of them pulling the wreckage out of the water, you can actually see the plane says Otis Redding on the side. And Otis was recovered. His body was recovered from the water the next day, and they gave him a burial on the 18th of December. He died on the 10th, and 4,500 mourners jammed themselves into a 3,000 capacity venue. Say goodbye to the great one, Big O, Otis Jr. So this is my pal Jim. Jim and I met in Clear Lake, Iowa, at the, I guess you call it the Buddy Holly, Richie Valens Memorial.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of the things that we kind of bonded over was Jim had told me he had made a documentary on the crash, and just on an off whim, you said, well, I'll let you tell the story of what you did in the newspaper.
Oh, was this regarding the photographs?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my business partner and I, in 2008, we were doing research for our documentary, which is still an unfinished documentary, but it's still going. And in part of our research, what we did was we put out an advertisement, well, not an advertisement, it was actually an article that was written in the Mason City newspaper, and asking if anybody had any leads on any photographs that were taken on February 2nd, 1959 at the Surf Ballroom, the final show.
The final show.
And we knew that there were photos. We knew people who had photos, but they weren't coming out publicly with them, really. They were very guarded with them. Well, long story short, we got a woman in a small town in Minnesota who responded to this article, got in contact with us. She said, well, I was there and I took 7 photos that night. And so we were excited but very skeptical because we had a lot of false alarms up until that point.
Yeah.
She this sweet elderly lady, she sent us photos, scans, like just literally Xerox copies of a couple of the pictures she had, and we got chills when we saw them because we knew that these were from the Surf Ballroom, because it had a sign hanging above the stage saying listen to the new KRIB, that's Mason City, Iowa radio station. So we immediately said, whatever we would like to, we would just love to be able to see these photos in person. We didn't think of purchasing them at the time from her, but ultimately what happened was we made her an offer, and we told her that no matter what we do, we would always give Mary Gerber, that's her name, the credit for the photos in any, whatever we do with them.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we acquired them, and in 2009 we unveiled them at the Surf Ballroom on stage, and they have had a full set of all 7 photos on display right inside the front entrance ever since then. So
yeah,
it's a good feeling of accomplishment. They are now where they belong. You know?
And if the documentary takes another 10 years, it accomplished something that you didn't even know you were trying to accomplish out of it.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And I thought that was really a cool story that you said the first thing you did with him was you offered him to Surf Ballroom. So anybody that's been there, that's seen those photos, it's thanks to Jim and his business partner.
Yeah, we were very lucky, and we wanted to do the right thing once we found what we found. And
it's cool because there's like photos of everybody, like some of Buddy, Richie.
There's Richie. The only person there's not a photograph of, unfortunately, is the Big Bopper.
Yeah.
And there's kind of a funny story behind that. It's because Mary, the photographer, she just wasn't a big fan of the Big Bopper at the time.
Didn't think it would be
that significant.
Yeah.
Of course, hindsight's 20/20. How does she know?
But she did have photos of Richie performing with Buddy drumming, which I thought was really cool to see.
Yeah, Buddy drumming. That's the only photo, as far as I know, in existence of Buddy Holly ever sitting behind a set of drums that I'm aware of anyway. And yeah, because they lost their drummer the night before, and a couple nights before, and they had
to fill in for each other.
It was either going to be Richie or Carlo from the Belmonts.
Yeah.
Or in this case, Buddy.
So you know a little bit, you said, about the Otis Redding crash in this area that some people don't know. What is that?
I guess I wasn't, just like with Buddy Holly, I wasn't born in 1967 when this crash happened, but I do know there's a couple of interesting facts. One is that where the aircraft went down in Lake Monona over here, it went down in about somewhere between 40 and 60 feet of water. And the left engine and left wing are still at the bottom of the lake. They never recovered them.
Wow. And as far as I know, they've never figured out an exact reason.
You're right. They never did actually. They did a lot of theorizing back then, and I think they just believed that the plane iced up. Very possible.
Yeah.
Most likely. It was a Beech 18. I don't know what that aircraft's capabilities were for de-icing or anti-icing, but it was it went down pretty hard. And
one survivor,
Ben Cawley of the Barkays, survived. And thankfully, because there were some people who were on the shore on the other side of Lake Monona, even though this was, December, they were out there and they saw what happened. They saw this low-flying plane come in and crash in the water. They had access to a small boat, and they were able to get out there fast enough to at least save Ben Cawley's life.
And is that the footage? I've seen there's some black and white footage of a rescue effort on a boat. Was that then or the next day?
No, it was most likely the next day.
Okay, because I saw him pulling some of the wreckage out.
Yes. And and the rest of the victims were recovered. Most of them, I think, were recovered the following day.
Yeah.
And but another interesting fact that a lot of people don't realize is the band that was... See, they were running late, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They were heating weather all day, and so they just decided to wait, and then until they really couldn't wait anymore to fly in from Cleveland. And they flew in, and by the time they were on approach, the opening band was already on stage. And the opening band, there's two interesting things about that. This was at a venue that no longer exists called the Factory in town here. And the band was called the Grim Reapers, which is kind of an ominous name.
Yeah,
and the
very.
Grim Reapers themselves were actually an early incarnation of the band Cheap Trick, because Rick Nielsen was in that band, and I'm not sure if
I didn't know that.
Robin Zander was not, but there may have been one other member who was also eventually went on to become Cheap Trick.
1967, totally believable.
Definitely, and it was announced from the stage that, and I don't know if they announced that there was an accident, but they definitely announced that the show was not going to go on. And could not go on, and they probably did say that there was an accident, and those are some interesting facts. It's just knowing that the left engine and the whole entire left wing, all together, are still sitting in.
Somebody will find it someday.
Somebody will salvage it, or at least document it.
Yeah, 26 years old. How heartbreaking.
Oh, I know. And I was just down at Stax, the Stax Museum in Memphis 2 months ago, and that was what an experience. That was incredible.
Yeah, I've been there. The recreation and everything. Plus, it's amazing to think of, how did Steve Cropper not end up on that plane as much as he worked with him, and just the people that Otis worked with. When you think about it, it's like some of the greatest musicians of all time, including Isaac Hayes, helping to arrange his sessions. So
incredible.
Yeah.
No, Otis was
one of a kind.
One of a kind, an incredible talent. Again, lost too young.
Right over these waters. Sadly, they were like 4 miles away, and the pilot messaged in to see about landing, and then they started going down, and the one person who survived said that he was asleep and woke up and heard the noise and saw one of the other band members, one of the Barkays, looking out the window, and said, "Oh my God." And Ben Cawley, the one who survived, said that he took his seatbelt off, and when the plane crashed, he grabbed a flotation seat because he couldn't swim, so he also couldn't save anybody. I want to visit Chris Farley again. Chris is entombed here in this mausoleum with his father. He's actually right behind the altar. Right there. Christopher Crosby Farley. Sad, untimely death. Man, God, is he funny. Fat man in a little coat. Also, that dance that he did with the Chippendales thing with Patrick Swayze, that was so good. That, that was hard for both of them. I know Patrick Swayze didn't necessarily like to do the dancing stuff because he liked to be considered like a real actor, not a dancer turned actor. But I know Chris didn't really want to do that either. Tom Arnold, he went to Tom Arnold and told him that they had written that for him, and Tom said, then you just have to be the funniest fat man dancer there ever was. And he was great. Tommy Boy, a huge fan of Tommy Boy, Black Sheep. I loved him, especially in Almost Heroes. That was just amazing. Rest in peace, Chris. Holy shnikes. So Chris's grave is the top one right through those doors. We were just in there. And I was wondering last time I was here, I couldn't, I would have thought his dad would have been close to him. Somebody said you had to go over to the next room, so there's his dad. His dad, Tom, was the one that he based a lot of his characters whenever he would start yelling or anything. You kids pipe down back there. I'm not taking any more guff from you. All that stuff. He based all that off of his dad. And I remember seeing that the Farley boys said that was like that was their gauge of comedies, if they could make dad laugh. So we're gonna go hit one more stop today. Something I wanted to check out. You know, when we were reading that Elvis plaque, said he was going to the Sheridan. There's also something else the Sheridan I want to see. So here we are over at the Madison Sheridan, and like I mentioned, this is where Elvis stayed his last time in Madison. Jim, you told me a funny story on the way over here.
Yeah, to go along with that story, I met the guy who was being beaten up by these two other guys, teens, early 20s guys at that gas station. I met him at a concert a couple years ago. He's still around here and he loves to tell the story. It's a really unique...
Did he say what it was over, why they were beating him up?
No, he doesn't really say, like, it was just over petty stuff, you know, just something insignificant. But when Elvis came out there in full karate mode, in jumpsuit and all, because, you know, he just got off his bike, and he was like, oh, come on, I'll take you guys on. And they were just... You know, they were just dumbfounded. They said, this was before Elvis impersonators, so this was Elvis. He stood around, signed a few autographs for people, and then eventually a small crowd started to gather, and then he was like, all right, we got to get going, and then they were on their way, and they went to the hotel, and then...
This hotel?
This is the place.
But not only was the Elvis history here, but one of the famous stories that you might know if you're a Van Halen fan is if you look in the liner notes, they end up thanking the Sheridan and Madison because they destroyed the 7th floor here. They had played a place called the Shuffle Inn. Apparently they were going to play the Orpheum, but it said online that the Orpheum had to back out because they were going to have 3 bands on the bill and they didn't think they could accommodate 3 bands. So it was moved to the Shuffle Inn, and one of the journalists that was there said it was more packed than she had ever seen it. And then this crazy party, it was like the 3rd stop on their tour. They got here on the 7th floor and just went wild. They have a plaque to memorialize it. You have to have a key card to get to the 7th floor, but they were nice enough when we asked them if we could just see the sign. They said they'll take us up. Oh, cool, we're going to the 7th floor. Come on in. It says in 1978, Van Halen was a 4-man party. During their first world tour, the band checked in to Madison Sheridan Inn, now the Sheridan Madison Hotel. This is the hotel room that they destroyed. Wow. Wow, it's nice and big.
Sure is.
Oh man, can you imagine the early days of Van Halen? They have some memorabilia in the room too. Check this out. They have one of the tickets from one of their shows here in Madison. Yeah, they always call this event the Going Mad in Madison. Yeah, if these walls could talk. Crazy thing is, yeah, this girl, she was a journalist at the time, and she wrote an article about hanging out with them, seeing like Eddie play his guitar and everything, and tell her about the first song he ever learned. Pretty big room already from what we've already seen, and then it wraps around the corner into here as well. And more memorabilia. Can you believe it? This room that we're in got thanked in Van Halen 2. That's so cool. Well, it's not every day that you're in a hotel room that gets thanked in an album. So yeah, check out Van Halen 2 and you'll see the thanks to this place. Very cool of them to let us in today. So that'll do it for us here in Madison. We're gonna call it a day from the famous Roth Room at the Sheridan. Have a great night and goodbye.